we're very thank you. Thank you for joining us. We're very excited to have this event, which we hope will contribute to the growing efforts to bring our movement together, to learn from each other, to share our experiences, our knowledge from organizing, and to build connections between one another, and especially internationally. We believe that is essential because the imperialism and Zionism that we are facing also coordinates and operates on an international level with multinational corporations whose production and supply lines span across the globe with imperialist political and economical dependencies and policies operating across our geographies. Palestine is at the heart of and we are facing that which brings us together, subject to Israel's ongoing genocide and decades-long apartheid and state terrorism. The Palestinian resistance has been a rallying beacon for the world's people, workers, and students who now stand united on one side against capitalists and complicit states and governments who continue to support Israel. They continue their support for the Zionist entity despite the apparent and growing reaction from their own people, and in many cases against the majorities, as in the US, demanding a stop to armed shipments and or ceasefires. The so-called leading democracies and their universities that claim to represent academic freedom, universal human values, show themselves to be genocide supporters and enablers. We come here today to talk about our experience against this current state of affairs and explore ways to join our movements together, just like the international movements against South African apartheid. We need an international movement, joined not only by students, but by workers and people from across the world. We need an international solidarity that refuses to fund, support, and be complicit in Israel's genocide and imperialism anywhere. So before we start, I'm just going to explain the technical, I guess, mechanics of the event. So participants can write questions to the chat, but you will have to write them to me, and you will have to let me know which panelists it's directed to. And for security reason, you're unable to unmute yourself. But I will be taking your questions and numbering them. And yeah, I think in the second half maybe we will open the chat. But in the chat right now, there's also more information about SUNY BDS, which is the org that I am a part of and that is hosting this panel. So we hope that at the end there's room to make connections across these organizations. But yeah, thank you. So I will start by introducing our first speaker, which is Jonas from SUNY BDS. And Jonas is a fashion design student at the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York. He is an organizer and a central committee to the FIT SJP and to SUNY BDS. And his favorite revolutionaries are Kwame Ture and Leila Khalid.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Elham, for the wonderful introduction. It's beautiful to see you all here. And thank you to everybody at SUNY BDS that put so much hard work into organizing this. I'm very excited. I'll try not to take too much time, but as Elham said, I'm representing FIT SJP, which is Fashion Institute of Technology, and SUNY BDS, which SUNY BDS is self-described as a collective of students, staff, faculty, alumni, and community pushing for the SUNY system for all 64 schools, as well as the central SUNY system to divest from ethnic cleansing, apartheid, and genocide. In early October, we held several rallies and collected people's information that allowed us to start having weekly meetings at FIT. And then we launched SUNY-wide Day of Actions in coordination with many of the other SUNY schools across New York. And many of the SUNY schools are also upstate, so it's difficult for FIT. We're the only one in the city. So we also worked with CUNY a lot as well, which is the city college and not the state college. We hosted days of action. We hosted fundraisers. Collectively, we marched on the SUNY headquarters in Albany, which was a great trip. And then, of course, we launched our encampment. I think we had the longest running encampment out of the SUNY schools. not to get competitive, but our encampment got raided after 13 days by the NYPD, and then on the last day of school, we hosted a sit-in in front of basically blocking the main entrance to school on the last day, and we were promised partial financial transparency, and we'll see if we haven't received that yet. In theory, we're supposed to get it before the end of the summer, so we'll see what happens. In response to these actions, students were put on academic probation, students were kicked out of the student housing, students were suspended, and many of us were arrested. So far, nobody has been expelled, but none of us have really had any of our hearings yet. So we'll see what ends up happening with that. To focus a little bit more broadly on the U.S. in general, because we are an international panel, I think we have a couple more people from the U.S., but it's definitely a little bit of a unique perspective since we're so deep in the belly of the beast, and the majority of the funding and weapons that are being used to commit this genocide are coming from the United States. So we have this country has I would say a higher vested interest in keeping the genocide going, and thus we have faced very extreme repression from the state and state police. We've had at least weekly, if not almost daily, protests in New York for the last 6 or 7 months, how long this genocide has been going on. And every protest, there's at least 10 arrests. Sometimes it's been up to 300 or even more. There's also been many examples of violent attacks from Zionists that are very much supported by the police and by the state actors. And if we defend ourselves too well, you're going to get arrested and you're going to get charged with all type of craziness. That being said, of course, we will continue to push for divestment in our institutions. I think coming into this next semester, we're looking to just keep building on the momentum that we gained last semester. And personally, I'm also looking to more explicitly support the resistance and bring it more into the spotlight, because that's a conversation that we had shied away from a little bit in the past, I think, trying to grow our organization as wide as possible. But it's definitely a conversation that's long overdue and that needs to be had, because at the end of the day, the resistance are the ones that will free Palestine, and we're here to follow their lead. But yeah, so as we continue to grow the movement towards socialism and away from this hegemonic war machine, we would do our small part as SUNY BDS and as FIT SJP to advocate for Palestine and for Gaza. I'm very excited to hear from all of you, and I would love to stay in touch after this panel as well. I was thinking it would be so cool to coordinate an action across many different countries. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Jonas. Our next speaker comes from Columbia University. Soph is an anti-Zionist Jewish student at Barnard College of Columbia University, who has spent the last year organizing University Apartheid Divest. They were one of the 100 plus students arrested and suspended on April 18th during the first Gaza Solidarity encampment, and they continue to organize against the Zionist entity through historic levels of university repressions. They focus heavily on integrating art into activism and mobilizing their Jewish peers to fight against the scourge that is Zionism.
Hi guys, I'm Soph. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a religion major with a concentration in the intersection between religion in America and social justice movements, particularly revolutionary social justice movements in America. I've been involved in Columbia JVP since I arrived, and in October I got more involved in Columbia SJP. as well, both clubs that I'm now a part of and organizing with. And our first protest was on October 12th, and it was one of the largest protests that we've had. There were, I think, more than 1,000 people there, and that was kind of, that protest led to Columbia becoming kind of a hotspot because we were one of the first quote unquote elite universities to have a massive protest for Palestine. Which led to, an increase in interest in Columbia because of our rapid mobilization, which was only possible through the extremely fast outreach we did and coalition building we began, reaching out to organizations like the Black Student Organization, the Latinx Student Organization, and essentially clubs across all breeds at Columbia. And we had an intense surge of mobilization that continued to build throughout a series of more and more protests. In November, SJP and JVP at Columbia University were suspended as student groups, which led to the official relaunching of Columbia University Apartheid Divest, which is a coalition of student organizations working towards achieving a liberated Palestine at the end of Israeli apartheid by urging Columbia to divest all economic and academic stakes in Israel. We seek an end to all interlocking systems of oppression through collective action and solidarity with oppressed people worldwide. We envision a free Palestine and necessarily envision a world free from colonialism and imperialism and from all interrelated systems of oppression that uphold them. We initially had 38 student groups at the manifesto's time of launch, and very quickly grew to more than 100 student groups following the launch signed on. And the energy from the student body upon this first action of mass repression, which was the suspension of these two clubs, grew tremendously. And I think people began to realize how much of, like, so many of the ways that the tactics that are learned and taught in Israel, like, are traveled abroad to the NYPD, to our universities, how many of these tactics are shared, exchanged, and just how much of a grip the Zionist entity has on the United States, on its universities, and the ways in which it is imperative that we, being one of the schools that is not only in the belly of the beast, but one of the schools that continually perpetuates imperialism, colonialism, has been actively colonizing Harlem for the last 100+ years. And I think just by having that position and acting out, we got a lot of, I think, perhaps undue media attention because there are so many schools who are doing so many important things, CUNY. And we realized that we had to use our spotlight and continue to fight. We had a series of successful protests throughout the end of the first semester, and entering the second semester, we were organizing a tuition strike, and we had a massive protest during which 2 former IOF soldiers attacked students with a chemical weapon, which at the time we believed to be skunk. We don't truly know what it was. I was sick for multiple days. Many of my comrades were hospitalized. And for a time, we were worried that this attack would lead people to be scared instead of further emboldening them. But each protest we had after had such a big presence. And this entire time, since the beginning, we'd been planning, I think since November, the Gaza Solidarity Encampment, which we knew we had to have some sort of escalation in order to bring Columbia to its knees. And eventually we settled on the idea of an encampment simply because of how public it is and how unavoidable it is to anyone who is walking around the campus. And as more and more people showed up to our protests, even after we were literally attacked, after the university, essentially after every single protest, the university would identify students based on where they swiped their IDs and security camera footage and send out disciplinary notices. Multiple students were suspended during the second semester following a Resistance 101 teach-in, and our protest following the suspension was one of the biggest we had had in a long time. So we knew that we were ready and our student body was ready to mobilize for an encampment. We launched the encampment to pressure Columbia into meeting our 5 demands, which is total divestment, Columbia out of Harlem, amnesty, an end to the dual degree program with Tel Aviv University, and the cancellation of the Tel Aviv Global Center, which is a lot of universities, because they're essentially international businesses within America. Like NYU does this, many different schools do it, open up centers in across the world. There are centers in Abu Dhabi, there are centers in France, and they are trying to break ground right now on a new one in Tel Aviv. Columbia has a massive Zionist presence, partially because of their dual degree program with Tel Aviv. So they're funneling mass amounts of IOF soldiers every single year, former IOF soldiers, directly into Columbia University. Hence the mass amount of Zionist counter-protesters we have, and a particularly vicious breed of Zionist counter-protester who is straight out of the military. And then during the first Gaza Solidarity encampment, I think we truly realized how ready our student body was to mobilize, and how unified we could be, in that we launched the encampment with about 60 people willing to get arrested, willing to refuse to leave. And we ended up, at time of arrest, having about 108 people get arrested. And these were people who saw the encampment and immediately chose to join. We had mass protests throughout all the nights, and we specifically chose to launch it on the date that Minouche Shafik was set to testify in Congress, to point out the hypocrisy of the congressional investigation into anti-Semitism on college campuses, and ignoring anti-Palestinian rhetoric, Islamophobia, any of our demands, and how we, no matter what we do, we will be skewed as anti-Semitic, because the greatest tool that the Zionist lobby has is the weaponization of anti-Semitism against anyone who would dare speak against them. And so we decided to put forward our own narrative. I ended up getting arrested alongside many of my peers, and was actually suspended alongside 2 other of my peers before the arrest. Everyone else was suspended afterwards. They specifically targeted myself and my 2 other friends because we were people who were speaking at protests and had consistently throughout the entire year been visibly rallying for Palestinian liberation, and visibly promoting and upholding the Thawabed, which, for people who don't know, that's the principles of Palestinian solidarity. And I think the greatest moment of my life was when I left jail and I hugged my friend, and she whispered in my ear that they started a second encampment, because I found out after I was in jail that everyone had hopped the fence into the other field directly across the way and immediately started setting things right back up. And to know that we had emboldened the student body so much so that they didn't care about the risk, that they didn't care. Yeah. Okay, time check. I'll wrap it up. The encampment lasted for 2 weeks, entirely beautiful, at the end of which a group of comrades decided to liberate Hamilton Hall, which is a site that had been the center of many deoccupations throughout history, including in 68, 85. And we were trying to honor the legacy of the activists that had came before us. And the building was renamed Hinds Hall after Hind Rajab, the 6-year-old Palestinian girl who was martyred alongside all of her family members while she was desperately calling for help. And we wanted to honor her legacy, and honor all of our martyrs, and realize that politics of respectability mean nothing in a genocide. So you need to disrupt, you need to escalate. I have never seen as many police in my life as I did when they stormed Hinds Hall. There were, I want to say, like a small army, like around 1,000 police officers. I was protesting and I was shoved to the ground. I had friends who were beaten. I had a friend who broke his eye socket. But even after that, and after this like vicious and disgusting attack, our mobilization grew further. We've had incredible events throughout the summer, organizing summer trainings as well as protests, especially regarding the disciplinary proceedings that they're trying to have over the summer for the students who are still up for suspension and expulsion. And we intend to continue to mobilize throughout the year because we, don't need to just be like protesting the Zionist entity. We need to have our hands around their neck. We need to keep pushing harder and harder. It's not enough to just say that you're in support of Palestine. It's not enough just to show up to a protest. You have to keep pushing. Thank you.
Thank you. So our next participant is Hannah from University of Tokyo. Hannah is a law student and one of the active members of the UT Palestine encampment, which started on the 27th of April at University of Tokyo Komaba campus and is currently still going on.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me and giving me this opportunity. My name is Hana from University of Tokyo. I represent the Komaba encampment in the University of Tokyo. I'm half Japanese and I'm a law student in the University of Tokyo. So our encampment started in the 27th of the April, so it's almost have been 3 months since our encampment started. We have about 30 members, and we organized 2 large demos so far in the Nakba Day and after that. And we have a great relationship with the other university in Tokyo. So it has been like a collective protest in the Tokyo. And the protest we've held in the University of Tokyo has been like one of the biggest student protests held in Japan. For our situation, we have submitted our demanding letter to the university, but they have been ignoring us. And our task, the difficulties we are facing now is the ignoring, it's that the university is ignoring us for more than 3 months. And also how other students are so indifferent to the situation. And especially in the Japanese society, talking about the politics is kind of taboo. And many people have been really indifferent to the situation. So that has been the difficulties for us. Yes. So now we are planning to escalate more and to interrupt the regular school activities. Yeah. The beginning of our encampment, we were heavily influenced by Columbia universities. And when we write our demanding letter, we referenced a lot from the Columbia University. And yeah, I think our next challenge is to escalate more and interrupt the university and make people hear our voices. Yeah, that has been our situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. Our next speaker is, I think it's Eden, from the Netherlands Students for Palestine. And Students for Palestine is an anti-colonial, anti-imperialist, and anti-Zionist organization based in The Hague. SFP has strived towards full academic boycott of Israeli institutions, as well as an end to the university's censorship at Leiden University since 2021. Over the last few months, SFP has mobilized alongside other groups in the Netherlands in creating liberated zones on all of their campuses.
Hi, everyone. My name's Eden. I use she, her pronouns. Thanks for this opportunity of being here today. So as an organization, Students for Palestine has been active in 2021, being that in The Hague, we are near the International Criminal Court, and it has also been a hot spot for Zionists who have come to our universities, have been invited in by staff there with open arms to be speakers. And as a response, as of this year, we've created several liberated zones on our campus, but also across the Netherlands. We've worked with other organizations, which has been met with a lot of police oppression. Most recently, in May, we attempted to create a liberated zone in our university and were met with riot police. But kind of bringing it in the broader picture of what we're fighting for, we want to bring academic boycott in a broader strategy to isolate Israel diplomatically, politically, economically, and militarily, because of the educational collaborations that are going on right now. We've managed to do this through teach-ins. We've protested on almost a weekly basis, sometimes in public spaces such as train stations and in front of the International Criminal Court. And that's mostly what we've been up to right now. So yeah.
Thank you, Eden. Our next speakers are from Turkey, Özgür Üniversite Hareketi, which is a free university movement. Beliz is an activist of the, Özgür Üniversite Hareketi Free University Movement, which was established nationwide on March 16 to liberate universities. The Free University Movement is an organization where students come together to take action against economic, political, academic, and social issues. Since its foundation, it has embraced the Palestinian resistance and conducted activities in solidarity with Palestine. Beliz is also an organizer of the Free University Movement's action in Istanbul in solidarity with Palestine.
Hi everyone, I'm Beliz, this is Uğur. We are both from the Boğaziçi University in Istanbul, Turkey. So just to make sure you understand the circumstances we are in, I have to give you a little backstory. So here in Turkey, universities and student movement in general, just like any other social movement, is under attack since 2015, very largely by the state, and we have very widespread non-organization. So when the resistance, the Al-Aqsa operation, I guess, I don't know the English term for it, happened, the resistance in Turkey grew from both sides, one being leftists and the other one being the Islamists, which was interesting in the sense that the base for the Islamists and the leftists were mostly together in resisting and standing one for Palestine, but the Islamist resistance usually was led by government-supported organizations, paramilitary organizations. So one difficulty we had in organizing the resistance and support for Palestine was actually trying to show the hypocrisy of the state of Turkey, and trying to show people that to actually support the Palestine resistance, we had to force our state to cut relations and economic, diplomatic, and academic relations with Israel, which I think, as many of you know, Erdogan acts as he's against the Israeli state, but on the other hand, as shown by the protests, he largely continues to do business with them. So when we started the resistance, we had to show this hypocrisy to begin with, and so we had to we tried to separate the paramilitary organizations backed by the government from the resistance in order to actually provide some talep neydi?
Demand.
So we can push our demands in the sense that it actually helps Palestine. And then
Yes, so one exception to this general tendency of being not organized was a group called 1,000 Youth for Palestine, right? So they came together just for the purpose of Free Palestine movement, and they tended to make, they started making really radical protests. So one striking example of this was there is a company which supplies oil, petrol for Israel. And then this group, which is called 1,000 Youth for Palestine, but it's basically, it is no longer a youth group. Everyone of every age is inside of it. So in this specific example, they basically tried to occupy the company that is supplying oil for Palestine, and they made really big media appearances. So they were also successful in bringing attention to this hypocrisy of the government. So the funny or ironic, perhaps tragic situation in Turkey is that we are officially a Muslim state, and we are, of course, against the genocide of Israel, but under the table, under the rugs, we continue to supply basically war supplies and oil for Israeli government. And so the protests and actions of this group was basically an example for us to look after, and we learned a lot from them basically.
yeah, and so in the campuses we tried to learn from our friends in US and in Europe in general, and try to make an example of it. But as I said before, the general non-organization and the fact that most of the protests are led by the government in order to actually demean the cause, the purpose, and hide their hypocrisy. So we were having a hard time to organize tent occupation protests in schools. So several schools, including İTÜ, Yıldız Teknik, Boğaziçi, and some small town colleges, I think we can call them, tried these protests, and most of them only made media appearances, but couldn't get any further than like 10-15 people. But in general, after the protests of 1,000 Youth for Palestine, the talep neydi ya? Demands that the economic relations with Israel to be shut down were very popular, and people actually tried forcing the government on these. But basically, like, the symbols of water bottle and tents were not a part of the protests in Turkey so much, but rather the not so
widespread.
Yeah, the protests didn't go very widespread, but in general, the demands were heard, and we made so many connections on these little protests. We had the chance to grow our organization in the sense that people actually want to do something about it, and maybe the tent didn't hold on here, but I think we will keep on doing more.
So one final topic we have in mind is that Turkey, perhaps you know this, is a NATO member, and we have a lot of military bases of NATO military bases, which are basically protecting Israel. And one specific is the one that is in Kurecik. It's a radar base, and it functions as a pre-warning system in case of a possible war which can break between Iran and Israel. So basically, the NATO base in Turkey serves the function of warning Israel if and when Iran sends a missile. It's a basically pre-warning system. So one action we did take about this issue was, as Free University movement, we went to the NATO base. At least we tried to go to the NATO base as a group, basically full of students and supporters. We also surprisingly got the support of the local people who were living there as well. And then we marched as it was possible to get close to the base, of course. And then we made a protest there. And we also think that the demand to close these bases, the demand, it's important to raise the issue and make people know more about the situation of these bases, because it's also, when you show this to people, it also makes apparent the hypocrisy that we were talking about. You know, we are, of course, Muslim brothers, we love Palestine, but at the same time, we have all these bases which are basically supporting Israel. So that was one area of protests. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you for agreeing to participate. Our next speaker is Jamie from Scotland, Ghassan for Rector Coalition. And Jamie is a Scottish Socialist Party activist who's been involved in the Palestine Solidarity movement at Glasgow University and across the city. He is one of 5 students involved in the organizing for Dr. Ghassan Abu Sitta's successful rector election campaign, which saw a Palestinian rector elected to the university court. Alongside students from other groups and societies, as well as independent activists and university staff, Jamie has campaigned to end the university's complicity in the genocide in Gaza and to mobilize as many students and staff as possible to achieve this.
Thanks so much, Elon, and thank you to SUNY BDS for organising this. I think international solidarity is just so important, and it's something that our movement could do a lot more of. So this is a great initiative. So I'm Jamie, and I was one of the organisers, as Elon was saying, for Dr. Ghassan Abu Sitta's successful bid to become the rector at Glasgow University. So basically in Scotland, several universities have a rectoral position, which is a role elected to the university court by students who's there basically to serve. Oh, can you hear me okay? Yep, okay, right, I'll shout a wee bit in case my microphone's a bit dodgy, because it's got a tendency to do that. Basically, the rector is elected to serve the interests of the students and be our voice on the university court. So earlier this year, we put forward Dr. Abu Sitta as a pro-Palestine anti-genocide rector, and through a long campaign, lots of protests, demonstrations, rallies, one-on-one meetings with students, it was eventually elected with 80% of the vote and historic landslides. Nothing the likes of it, so I've seen it at the of admin stuff and trying to disqualify Dr. Abasata from the race on grounds that would have complaints from the Jewish Chronicle newspaper, Zionist groups across the UK and abroad. They all failed because of the strength of the student movement behind Gassan and behind us. And in the end, we managed to push the university into voting on divestment. So as it stands, and it still is the case, that the university has £6.8 million invested in arms companies. So we've basically been pushing as one of our key demands, as well as calling on them to condemn the genocide and to actually call it a genocide as opposed to a war, which is the sort of weasel word that we've been using so far, and to scrap the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism and replace it with the Jerusalem definition, which is one of the sort of pledges that the opponents of the campaign had focused in and honed in on. But again, we get, I was just saying, one of the key demands of the campaign, is that better? Yeah. One of the key demands of the campaign was to scrap the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. So that's something that we've been working with the unions at the university on for a few months, so since October. And the student staff solidarity there has been so important. We're lucky to have quite a radical union branch at Glasgow with the lecturers union and with other staff unions. And we've worked sort of congruently with them over the course of the campaign, and they've been so supportive and so brilliant. So that as it stands, the university has put off divesting for as long as possible. It's kicked into the long grass. It's carrying out a review. It's setting up groups, working groups to look at it, which is all total diversion tactics. And I'm sure you'll all be familiar with similar tactics from your own movements. But we've got, again, such a massive deal of support. We've got Gassan in there now, so the movement at the Glasgow University is very strong. And just for a wee bit of sort of national context, we had our general election a couple of weeks ago, where the outgoing right-wing Conservative government was replaced by another right-wing Conservative government under the name of the Labour Party, with Sir Keir Starmer, who is a great ally of Israel and of NATO, and has made it one of his key missions in his first few weeks as Prime Minister to ingratiate himself as much as possible with NATO, with Joe Biden in America, and with Israel. So obviously the Palestine solidarity movement was warning about what Keir Starmer is like, who his friends are, a long time before he was elected, and we're continuing to put pressure on him. One of the key chants at most of the rallies, which continue every single Saturday in Glasgow, Edinburgh, London, is "fuck Keir Starmer," and we're still going to be shouting "fuck Keir Starmer," but probably with a lot more support behind us as people in the UK realise what he's all about. But yeah, I mean, the state of the movement in the UK is strong, and I think one of the key steps that we could take is to take up initiatives like this and reach out to other movements internationally, which is why I think panels like this are so useful. I hope you've managed to hear most of that. My microphone isn't the best, but if you picked up on it, fantastic. And again, thanks so much for inviting us to talk, and I look forward to working with all of you in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jamie. Okay, so our next participant is Sambulu Shongwe from Swaziland National Union of Students, who is Secretary General of SNUS, and a student union in Swaziland that organizes students and rallies for a free, quality, and relevant education against a Swati-led autocratic and repressive Tikum Hitler regime.
Greetings, comrades. Firstly, can I confirm my audibility if I'm audible on your side? Okay. No, thank you very much, comrades. I'm very sorry, comrades, for the technicalities I've been having, Makaban. I'm actually on transit, comrades, joining the Communist Party of Swaziland, its annual winter school. It is actually having its annual winter school starting from today up until Sunday. So as the Communist Party of Swaziland, as the Swaziland National Union of Students, we have also been delegated to join the Communist Party of Swaziland in that gathering, comrades. And firstly, comrades, one would like to start by appreciating this opportunity, comrades, of being granted and uniting with the working class organization, especially the youth organizations around the world, comrades, especially for the genocide perpetrated by the Israeli government, supported and backed by the US government, comrades. Comrades, as introduced earlier on, comrades, I am Sambulo Shong, the Swaziland, from the Swaziland National Union of Students, comrades. It is a union of student movement in Swaziland that organizes students around the country, comrades. So as SNUS, comrades, we are in this country, Swaziland, and we are also in a country worth mentioning that it is a country ruled by an absolute monarch, by King Mswati III, comrade. It is the last absolute monarchy that exists in Africa. So, comrade, Swaziland, it lives, we organize students under those conditions, comrade. I think this can be a testimony that I am here now, comrades, sharing this video on transit into a neighboring country, South Africa. So we are not able to organize political activities in the country, such that the political parties were banned in as a result of the decree by King Sobhuza of 1973, where political parties were banned in the country. So political activities are prohibited in Swaziland, comrades. So it is for that reason that even now I am not in Swaziland, but I have just crossed into South Africa, comrades, where we have tried to have a venue for that political school, comrades. So, comrades, firstly, it will be comrades, SNUS is found joining hands with organizations or seeking to join hands with organizations around the world as a result, comrades, of of the struggles we are seeing in Palestine by the Palestinians, comrades, against the Israeli genocide. In Swaziland, comrades, it is much familiar or much closer for us as Swazis to relate with the struggles of the Palestinians due to the struggles we are subjected to under the Mswati dynasty in Swaziland, comrades, which is also backed by the USA imperialist, also in support with the Taiwanese Taiwan colonial government, which is also located in Swaziland in collaboration with the USA government, comrades. So, comrades, as SNUS, we have been an organization that has been involved, comrades, with the struggles of Palestine for some years now. I think for more than 5 years now, comrades, where we have been collaborating with, especially actually with the Communist Party of Swaziland in commemoration of the Israeli Apartheid Week in each and every year. We have been, comrades, I think since 2018, comrades. So it has been that for that reason that even now we find it necessary to join hands with other working class youth organizations around the world to join in the fight against the against the Palestine under the genocide of the USA, comrades. And comrades, we also find it necessary to join this campaign as a SNUS, as we are also subjected and actually, we have also been made subject of these imperial forces around the world. As I have mentioned earlier on, that in Swaziland we still live in a country whereby it is a country that is led by King Mswati III, and is also leading this country with the support of the USA imperialists and also with the British colonial comrades. So we are being able to see exploitation at first hand. The violation of human rights, especially students and youth of the country, we are experiencing.
Okay, so his connection did that. But if he comes back, then of course we'll let him finish. I think maybe we can move on to the next speaker in the meantime, and let him know when he comes back. So our next speaker is Talia from AUB, which is the American University of Beirut. And Talia is one of the 7 cabinet members of the SJP chapter at the American University of Beirut. The group has led successful protests centering the demands of the BDS resolution in front of the administration and the president of the university himself. Alongside other Palestine-related groups on campus, SJP is trying to rally the students and staff to put pressure on the university to end the complicity in genocide via the implementation of the BDS demands. SJP is aiming to exist long-term on campus in order to keep students fighting for solidarity, historical justice, and the liberation of Palestine on campus and beyond.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me well? Because I'm on Bluetooth. I'm not sure if there's going to be any issues with that. Okay, great. Okay, yeah, so I'm a member of the SJP chapter in the American University of Lebanon, and Lebanon itself is at war with Israel currently. So it's a very specific situation that we're in. I just want to say, like, Palestine solidarity in Lebanon is very common, since it is also a country that is attacking ours and has been trying to occupy it and has for a time successfully occupied it. So the sentiment of solidarity is very strong. So there has always been movements in our university for Palestine, whether it's a cultural club or for political action. But the SJP now has specifically organized in reaction to October 7 and to the genocide in Gaza. It apparently also existed before at our university, but scattered because people were graduating and then there was no one following up. So we're trying to tackle this problem to make it sustainable, even if some of the members are graduating now, that we always have someone in place after to just keep it strong and going. And yeah, as I said, like, solidarity for Palestine is very common. And especially because at the university, we have a lot of Palestinian students that have lived in Lebanon for the 4th, 5th generation after their grandparents have been expulsed in, like, the Nakba or the Naksa, and even the staff that teaches there. The whole university itself, I think, would not exist without Palestinian refugees, to be quite honest, because they are the people who have built the university up and are the ones who are employed there and studying there. And there's a lot of research dedicated to Palestine in the university itself. So there's like an oral archive, there's a Palestine Land Study Center, there's a lot going on. And I think this is one of our main issues, because it makes it seem like there are no ties to the Zionist entity at all, since we have all of these things. But of course, it is an American university, so the board of trustees are American, some of them are Zionists, and that's very clearly, like, traceable through statements and also through contracts and cooperations with companies that invest in Israel. So by Lebanese law, you are forbidden from crossing the border, and you are forbidden from even talking to an Israeli person. So the ties are not direct, and this is something that is very difficult for our movement because it's difficult to prove them, and you have to do a lot of research, and you have to juxtapose this to all the events that the university is doing for Palestine. They were doing like a fundraiser for Gaza, for example, but at the same time, they're giving out scholarships that are also offered and funded partially through in Israel. So there's a lot of like, it's a very difficult situation. And I think this is one of our main issues in the movement and in gathering people and having like a mass of people, because it's not as clear cut as like, for example, in America, I think. So people don't necessarily believe or want to believe that the ties are very strong and that we have to have full financial transparency and we have to divest and cut all the ties, even up to like boycotting products of the vending machines or in the cafeteria that are offered at the campus. And what we have done so far is we have led a couple of big protests and we have had a lot of people come there. As far as encampments go, we don't have enough numbers to do that. We have forwarded our demands to the administration. Some of the activists have talked with the president personally and have also videotaped it. But it's very, yes, we will look into it. We will do it kind of. It's not going to happen really. And they have also been ignoring us for some time. But yeah, we don't have the numbers to escalate the protest, which is what we would want to, because we have to in some way put pressure on the administration. So I think in some ways there is a similarity to like issues in Turkey with this whole hypocrisy thing that like, you know, the state makes it seem as if, no, we're with them, but actually what are you doing to show that? And we have the same issue in the university. So yeah, we are trying to build action for next semesters to educate people, to get like boycott culture going on campus, just to rally more people, like they feel responsibility. Because there also is this notion of, well, if you want to help, then go fight for the south of Lebanon, go fight for the people in the south. There's some rivalry also going on. And because Hezbollah is involved in this whole conflict, there is sentiments towards that group that also kind of impede. The whole thing is very nuanced and very complicated, which makes the action for it way more complicated. But we are seeing a lot of more people boycotting currently than did before. So that's a good sign. And there's way more like, there's way more talk about Palestine, and we're trying to keep the topic present, like in the hearts and in the minds of the people, and to not normalize the state of war that has always been in this country, because people are tired and they kind of gave up and they don't want to do anything because war or like explosions keep happening. And I think that's a general sentiment of we just can't handle another thing. And we're trying to kind of disrupt this mentality. I think that's all I wrote down for now. Yeah, I think that's good.
It's okay. Thank you, Talia. That was great. Okay. I don't know if Sambala will be joining back again, but in the meantime, we can get started with the questions for our panelists. The first one is from Jonas.